Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. And we have a special guest today, Philip Taylor, or as you may know him, PT. PT is the founder of PTmoney.com, but probably you know him better as the founder of FinCon, which actually, PT, I'll confess, I would bet a lot of people that go to FinCon don't realize that that was your baby because it's such a powerful event in its own. But with all that said, welcome to the show, man. So glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be on with you, man.
Well, let's jump straight into FinCon because registration is open for that, and it's coming again this fall. I'm trying to think. The first time I went to FinCon must have been 5 or 7 years ago. It's been a while now. The first time I went, but a phenomenal. Honestly, more than conference isn't even the right word. Like, what would you call it, PT? It's almost like you started as a party, right? Just to get together with your blogger friends.
Yeah, it was kind of a community meetup of sorts, right? So the FinCon community existed before I started the event for them. And I was a member of this community of personal finance bloggers online who talk shop every day in forums. And this was pre-social media, so we just were kind of online in forums, sharing ideas and helping each other grow our online, websites. And so we would go to other conferences, tangentially related, financial conferences, marketing conferences, and we would just meet in the hallways. And it was like, okay, we need kind of our own space. And it just became apparent 3 years into my journey into doing this that we needed our own event. And so, I was the guy to throw the first party, and I've treated it ever since like an event I wanted to go to too. So I really tried to set it up to where I wasn't necessarily on the stage or it was about me or my ideas, but it was about this community and the ideas that collectively we could bring together and help make each other better at what we're doing. So, because the people who come to our event are doing fantastic work, helping people with their money and improving folks' lives in a rich way. And so it's cool that our event gets to serve them.
I love this mindset, right? You said you created an event that you wanted to attend. There's sometimes this temptation, and you and I have been to events that are like this, where it almost it becomes like all about me. Like, this is actually the event I want to produce for everyone else. But I've seen you at the event. You sort of float around in it, and you're sitting in sessions and you're learning. Like, you're still such a student of the game. But this mindset of, all right, what event would I want to attend? Because if I'm passionate about being there, odds are everybody else will be passionate about it too.
Right. Yep. And I think it's something special about our community as well, in that they sort of are money experts, right? And so what they don't necessarily have is marketing expertise. And so we can share ideas amongst each other, and that'll help us grow a lot faster if we're just open. And we also realize that not one of us is going to wrap our hands around the financial issues of our country and world and fix them all ourselves, right? Dave Ramsey's doing his best. He's probably got the biggest reach of all of us, but Dave can't even do it by himself. So we need to come. And I think everyone realizes that at this event. It's like we need to really lock arms to work together to achieve this bigger goal. And so if we're doing that, then that means sharing ideas, how we're growing our firms, how we're growing our websites. Is just gonna help us all achieve our goal. So really, rising tide floats all boats mentality with the event.
Yeah, you really have with that community. There's such an abundance mindset, right? Everybody, the times I've been and talked to people, right? Everyone's sharing about what works and what didn't work and what they're excited about. And it isn't this sort of fiefdom, if you will, right? No one's saying, hey, I can't talk to you because you're also a podcaster and you're going to steal my audience. It's really, hey, here's what we should all be doing or all could be doing.
Right. And that's part of our culture as an event, as a company. So the employees who now run the conference, they understand it, they know that, they live by that. And so every aspect of the event gets sort of checked against that value system. And so ongoing, it's always sort of kind of reverting back to those things. For instance, when we choose our speakers, it's something that's an open source opportunity. So anyone and everyone can submit a topic to speak at FinCon, and then a committee will help choose that based on sort of their understanding, based on previous surveys, what they know the community likes. They'll sort of narrow that down. And then when you get there as a speaker, you're not necessarily treated as royalty. There's a sort of a flatter hierarchy at FinCon. And so speakers are actually almost required to do a lot more at the event and serve the audience in a way by doing mentoring, by participating in sort of some extra networking opportunities. And so I think this cultural thing that we've instilled in the event really helps to create sort of a flatter hierarchy where everyone's sort of helping each other out too. So we actually have to guard against that because it's natural instinct once you get on that stage, and the FinCon stage has become a bigger stage.
Yeah, it has.
And so, and people want to be on there, and an event has a way of elevating folks' profile and what they're doing with their business. And certainly we want to help them do that. But to maintain that culture, we really have to make it it's really a part of our system. So
now a part of that, or a subset of that community that you've developed, or that's developed around FinCon, is financial advisors, which is largely the audience that we speak to with this podcast, right? So I think there seems to be a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's obviously a lot of people similar to yourself where blogging or podcasting or YouTube is their full-time profession, but you've also got a good subset of financial advisors who financial advising is their main business, and then they're using content creation probably as a lead funnel primarily. But there are quite a few of those. I have several friends, Benjamin Brandt, a good friend of both of ours, who great financial planning practice, great podcast. FinCon is his favorite event to attend each year. So it's not just like, I guess, the DIY crowd, not to be disparaging. It's not just that group.
Sure. And I'm a CPA myself,
right, yeah.
But you're right. I don't necessarily have clients anymore. And so when I come at content, it's from a purely marketing standpoint. Like I want eyeballs to my website, and I convert them into ads or commissions for products and services, banks, brokers. And so 25% of our attendees have some sort of certification, which we would generally call an advisor or some type of financial coach or something. And so we know that their end goal is obviously attracting clients and converting them. And so, yes, we have tracks at FinCon that focus less on the ads and the affiliate marketing stuff and focus on converting those eyeballs to your website over into true clients and identifying like what clients you actually want. So, and those sessions are led by advisors like Benjamin, like you mentioned, who are really passionate about the content creation process and online marketing process. So yes, we tend to attract the advisors who are internet nerds like ourselves, who sort of get that end of it and maybe over-index on wanting to create content. Michael Kitsis comes to mind, who's someone just a prolific blogger. Yeah. Like you couldn't stop that guy from blogging if you, if you really wanted to. But that tends to be who we attract. The podcast medium is obviously very big amongst the financial advisor community. So we have obviously tracks on podcasting, and a lot of them come there and talk about that topic as well. So if content is your game as a means to an end to get the client, but really it's like that's the piece that's kind of exciting you about your business. Or if you've got a team member who specializes in that, then that may be the person who's best suited to go to FinCon for you.
Yeah, great that you mentioned on the team members. So last year for FinCon, we sent Amber, who produces the Perfect RIA podcast and does a lot of our content. We sent her to FinCon, and I'd be curious, PT, your thoughts. Something that we gave her when she went, we said, hey, you're going to have a great time at FinCon no matter what. It's a phenomenal event. But we gave her a list. Here are some specific people we want you to track down. And here's 4 or 5 questions we want you to ask everybody you run into. So she didn't just go to absorb, and we hope that it worked out. It really helped to give, you're going to send a team member, give them really clear marching orders. Here's 3 or 4 questions to ask everybody. And ours was about, I think she was asking everybody about dynamic ad placement in the podcast. And we just hit like 1.4 million downloads. So find someone that's in that space and say, hey, how do we go to the next space? But curious PT thoughts that you have. If you're sending a team member who might not necessarily know how to work a conference, what advice would you give them?
So we have an entire guide we've written. So FinCon for financial advisors that I can share with you, and we can put a link up if you'd like to share with your audience. But some of the things on there, just off the top of my head, are, like you mentioned, ensuring that you're trying to meet with as many folks as possible. If you do have, and having questions like that are great for networking. But if you do have goals in mind, like a lot of the FinConners I know you would like to have on your podcast, and you'd like vice versa to be on their show. So there's nothing wrong. Like collaborations are huge at FinCon. It's not a negative thing to sort of offer yourself up as a financial, because you're an advisor. You actually have a lot of authority in the space. And so if they need sort of that additional boost of authority, for instance, on their podcast, they talk a lot about budgeting or sort of family money management. But when it comes to the investing side of things, they get a little gray and they want to sort of bring in a expert to sort of boost the content up and interview somebody about particular topics, then they're going to lean on a financial advisor, a CPA, a CFP, somebody like that to sort of bring in. And so you can become that person. So at FinCon, I would broadcast like as much as possible while you're at the event. Try to meet as many podcasters there, or bloggers who rely on sort of authority, and become the source. So it's easy if you're 15-20% of the audience there that really has this type of authority, has established themselves with credentials and experience serving clients, then you're sort of in demand, right? And so you're going to stand out and show yourself as being available for these collaborations and be an expert. Establish yourself as an expert. Obviously, I already mentioned we have an open source speaking opportunity. So if she's managing a podcast show already, her expertise in running this show for a financial advisor is a great topic. And sort of the behind the scenes of editing or producing a show for a financial advisor would make a great talk at FinCon. So if she feels comfortable doing that, submitting a session. We have obviously service providers there. So I think you're using Riverside to run your podcast recording.
Correct.
So we try to get as many of those sort of digital marketing solutions at the event as well. So you have opportunity to see them, check them out, test them out, and then partner with them to help you produce whatever content you have going on down the road. And in addition to that, service providers in the area, like freelance writers, folks who can sort of you can add to the team. Like, so if Amber said, you know what, the show's great, but I'm sick of writing show notes, so I'm going to hire that out. Who at FinCon can help me sort of fill in that gap or help us do more on the social media side? So finding a contractor, finding someone to add to the team, FinCon will be a great place to do that as well. And we'll share the link to more ideas, but we got a ton of ways that advisors can to make the most of being at the event.
I'm glad you mentioned on the vendor, the technology side. I mean, that's how we got introduced to Justin, who does most of our video production for Perfect RIA events. In fact, come to the RTS Tax Summit, right? Justin will be there with his team. And it's so much better to meet a vendor at an event or to say, hey, PT, who are you using for this thing or that thing? And you say, I use so-and-so, I use Riverside, or I use whatever, and I love it. That saved me a ton of time versus let me read their websites and let me go through the vetting process. Hey, if it's somebody that PT likes, boom, I'm going to use them.
Yep.
Well, PT, if you don't mind, let's shift gears just a little bit. You have, before FinCon started, before you started FinCon, you were running your website, PT Money, for several years now, primarily or almost entirely on a blogging space. I feel like podcasts get a lot of discussion right now, but blogging was really a predecessor to podcasts. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about the evolution that you've seen. Tell us, are blogs still relevant? Is it just going to all be Chat GPT? I mean, that seems to be like the vogue discussion right now. Tell us your thoughts, being an expert in this space.
Yep, I'm a dinosaur blogger. I guess at this point. Started back in 2007 after having read blogs for 3 years prior to that. I was obsessed with personal finance. I was in my mid-20s trying to fix my own financial life. Having a CPA didn't do that, so I had to sort of take additional ownership of my personal finances, money management, getting out of debt, things like that. So reading blogs was a way to sort of understand money in a more intimate way that people were sharing online, where I could really understand things and see the goals they were setting for themselves, and really challenge myself against these benchmarks that people were setting, whether it was maxing out their Roth IRA by the end of the year or paying them down their debt rapidly. These things, for whatever reason, were really exciting to me. And so seeing their story led me to make progress in my finances. But then also, I realized I had a voice in me as well. I was a CPA, so I could add more to the conversation when it came to maybe taxes or retirement planning. And so I jumped in as well. 2007, started my own blog. Didn't really consider myself a great writer at the time, but just sort of hacked my way around and copied what the others were doing. So if you are a content creator, I would say the first thing or you want to become one, the first thing to lean on is sort of to just sort of mimic what others are doing out there. Not in the copying sense, but just sort of, riffing off of what others are doing. And back in the blogging community back then, this was a big thing. People just sort of, oh, you wrote on that topic, I'll write on it from my perspective, and we all shared each other's ideas. It was really great. And so 3 years later, that side hustle of a blog became my full-time gig. So I was able to leave corporate finance and just become a blogger full-time. Blew me away that I was able to do that. And so it allowed me a year later then to start FinCon in 2011. And so then I had both businesses going and running. So blogging has been something that has changed my life. Being on the internet and producing content that helps people has obviously hopefully changed others' lives. And so is blogging still a thing I do today? Yes. So I've kept PT Money going. In fact, I've changed the name to Part-Time Money. It's more focused on business, entrepreneurship, side hustling. Still the same URL though, ptmoney.com. Yep. And so it's sort of a yin and yang to FinCon in that it keeps me in the industry. It keeps me sort of understanding content creators because I am still one myself. And it's still a little side, a little side income for me. So it's nice. So I produce probably an article a week on average on that site. If I were to advise an advisor who didn't necessarily resonate with the podcast space, but really sort of thought maybe blogging is their thing, I would say it's not too late.
That was going to be my question, right? So here, you've been doing this for 15 years now, 16 years.
Right. Right.
You followed this space before that. You run the conference for financial content creation. There's sort of this fear. I remember when we started this podcast of, it's already dominated, right? Like Dave Ramsey's already talking to everybody to pick a really famous name, or Mr. Money Mustache has already dialed in being snarky on, or whatever it is. It feels like, hey, there's no room left. So I'd be curious. Right. You say, but it's not too crowded. You could still get into it.
You can still get into it. You can still have your own voice and be heard and be seen, and share your perspective. Because ultimately, like the content that's going to rise to the top in the future, now that we have AI here producing content for us, is the content that is personable and real and story based and authentic, right? So it's real experiences, real people experiencing real things going through them. And that's just going to be really hard for AI to produce on its own. I'm not saying one day it won't, but right now we've seen that that's sort of the missing link for them, and that may be that way for a while. They can provide a lot of information, great factual information, but it's really hard for them to get personal and because they aren't a person. And so, yes, I do think it is a good time to jump in as a blogger still. There's a ton of information about how to get started with blogging. I would just say if the change I've seen in the last 6 months, and this has happened really quickly, is that yes, you can use something like an AI to help produce a piece of your content, and you can use it to sort of test ideas against Google or against social media to see sort of what pops, help you generate something faster, and then maybe jump back in and add some more personal details. But what's gonna separate the sort of bloggers treading water in the past to the ones having success in the future is the ones who are able to jump on ideas quickly and execute quickly on them in a personal way. So putting something out there that the bigger websites or that AI generators aren't putting out there because they're not really staying on top of what sort of the current things are. Yes, there are some spaces online that are dominated by the nerd wallets of the world, the bank rates, and it's just going to be hard to get on some of those in some of those spots. But there are new products and services, new developments in personal finance and investing popping up every day. And so if you could be the person who's sort of first to market with those ideas, I think there's still a pathway in blogging, if that makes sense. I had a hard time explaining that, but that's kind of my two ideas right now circulating.
Yeah, no, it pulled me back to something you mentioned earlier about talking about it in sort of intimate ways, right? Really, really telling the story. So don't write the 4 millionth article on backdoor Roth conversions in some generic voice that you would also see on Fidelity.com or Vanguard.com, right? It sounds like if you can write that in your voice relative to current with real stories of real people and how it tied to your getting out of debt story, whatever the case may be, that there's still a market for that. But again, I guess the short answer would be if you're writing the same thing that ChatGPT kicks out or you're podcasting it, it's not going to get very far. But if you can tell that story that nobody else is telling in your voice, in your way, with your idiosyncrasies, there's still a lot of room for that, it seems.
Yep. I think there's room for it. And if you need to think about blogging too going forward as a living, breathing sort of thing, in that you don't just produce a piece of content and then it's out there and you let it go forever. You need to be constantly updating like every component of your site. Every old article, the fresher you can keep things, the more Google will see you as an alive site and more likely to kind of show your stuff in their search engines. And then more likely you'll resonate with real readers and you'll get shared socially and those things. So
PT, is there a length?
Yep.
Is there sort of a length of time where is there any rules of thumb for freshness on content where you say, hey, after X period of time, it's probably not going to do you a lot of good?
Yeah. That's a good question. It depends on the article. It just depends on what else has been written out there about it. If it's literally outdated, obviously it needs to be updated. I try to do a once over annually on my site. And then I've listed about 10 or 15 articles that I check on a monthly basis because they're tied to, for instance, interest rates that might change or particular offers from some of my ad partners that might change on a monthly basis. So those are the two big factors. But I would say if you've got something on your site that hasn't been touched in a year, it's time to update it.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. And it's good to go back and check those. I think in my mind, oh yeah, everything on the site's been updated in the last few months. But then you go and you look and it still says copyright 2017 or something, right? It's way out of date.
Right.
I love that. Well, PT, I really appreciate the insights that you've shared here. Our podcast, we always try to have action items for our listeners. So as you kind of speak to the listeners of financial advisors, obviously we want them to attend FinCon, check out Part-Time Money, ptmoney.com. What's an action item that stands out that anybody listening to this could take action on?
Sure. I really like when it comes to events, I really like what Adrian Seeger produces over at Conferences That Work. So I would just recommend as a resource as a starting point, because we go to a lot of conferences. We sort of see them from afar. We think we understand how they work, but he really does a deep dive into sort of the internals of events and what makes them really successful as humans and how we really want to work together when we're in person. FinCon's not perfect, but I based a lot of it on the ideas of Conferences That Work. And so it's a great resource for anybody out there.
I love that, which would be a great resource even if you're not hosting a conference, if you're just doing client education events or even client Zoom calls, right? To understand the human dynamic behind that is really powerful.
100%. In fact, one of his big tenets is really trying to keep conferences on a smaller level. And so if you do smaller meetups or smaller client get-togethers, his book would be fantastic for sort of understanding how people want to meet up and work together. Even if there is one true expert in the room, he still has some advice for how to make that work.
I love in fact, that. Well, I'm going to go add that to my reading list right now.
Yeah, the 4 questions you had Amber put together for attending FinCon, I bet they would not be too far off from the 4 questions he suggests. In fact, that's one of his things. He's like, here are the 4 questions you should start with whenever you host an event. Have everyone have these questions and be asking each other. Anyway, side note.
No, I love that, man. That's great.
My other resource or tip when it comes to blogging, there's someone out there now who's, I think, on the cutting edge of what's happening in blogging. So if you want to jump in right now, someone who really understands how it's changed over the past 6 months is Adam Infroy. He's got a great blog, but he's got a better YouTube channel. Adam Infroy, Enfroi. He's just a fantastic resource. He understands sort of how to treat blogging as a startup and really get success fast. So if you want to jump into it, like he can help you like fast track it. So he's sort of my second resource there. Yeah.
Oh, those are both really cool. I appreciate those. I just put them both on my reading list. That's one of the things I love about doing this podcast, PT, is it forces me to find out like, all right, what are the cutting edge things? How do I keep my game sharp? Well, PT, really appreciate you coming on the podcast. These are some great insights. I'm going to totally check out these 2 that you mentioned. And of course, I'll be able to see everyone at FinCon, which is in New Orleans this year, right?
It's down in New Orleans this year, October 18th through 21st. So we'd love to have you. Tickets still available. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, PT, thanks for
Matt.
all that you've done, and thanks for hosting FinCon. I've had a lot of fun there. I look forward to seeing you there again.
Yep.
And for all our listeners, until next time, happy planning.